in Gaudiya Math. Some of the younger devotees took sannyas like in their 20s. And they simply preached for their whole life. That's all they did. And at the end of their life, even though they got old and their body got sick, the society took care of them. So we expected something similar to happen. But of course, that's not what happened at all. There was a great disturbance within ISKCON. Some of the so-called leading disciples took over the society from within. And actually they had taken over the management long before Śrīla Prabhupāda disappeared from this world. They had taken over the bank accounts and the deeds and the paperwork and the corporations and all of that stuff. And they pretty much marginalized Śrīla Prabhupāda. They made him a figurehead. And the firm's firm grip on the management was in their hands as early as 1967. Certainly by 1969, it was already pretty much a done deal. Śrīla Prabhupāda might have had some managerial power over his India branch, but as far as the Western branch, it was pretty much out of his hands. So, I'm not going to get into the issues surrounding Śrīla Prabhupāda's disappearance, but let's just say it was not normal, natural death. So after that, there was a great disturbance within ISKCON, and those who declared themselves gurus after the departure of Śrīla Prabhupāda made it impossible for most of their godbrothers to stay within ISKCON. They pretty much forced us all out. So we all had to make do somehow or other. And most of my godbrothers gradually gave up the idea of serving Krishna or serving their guru. Most of them fell down to mundane existence. They found it, and I also experienced this, I found it very difficult to continue with devotional service in the midst of, rascal, meat-eating society with, cutthroat economic competition going on all around us and so on. So most of the devotees gradually lowered their standards of spiritual existence or spiritual practice, and eventually most of them completely fell down. And I would be lying if I said I didn't go through a similar period where I got very slack in my practice of Krishna consciousness. But then something kept bothering me. I had made a promise. I had made a promise, but then I allowed some mundane condition to interfere with my promise. So was that promise really spiritual? Was that promise really eternal? Was it independent of the material nature, or was I allowing the influence of the material nature to interfere with that promise? I started asking myself these questions, and they were very uncomfortable questions. And finally, toward the end of the 1990s, I had to, after so many experiences in the material world, I had to say, wait a minute, this is not working. It's not working because the person who gave me the most valuable gift, the spiritual life, Krishna consciousness, made a promise to me to deliver me from this material world. And I made a promise to him to serve him. And now I'm going back on that promise. So how can I expect him to come through on his promise? I don't have any right, because I'm not upholding my end of the promise. even though it's not a deal, it's not a business deal. Like, you give me this and I'll give you that. That's a business deal. But it's a promise made out of generosity and love. But still, if our promises are only as good as what's convenient for us, or what's easy for us, then what really is the use of them? So many people nowadays get divorced. And even we see devotees getting divorced. In fact, the divorce rate of devotees is higher than the general population. I myself was married 3 times. Once before being a devotee and twice after being a devotee. None of them worked out. So I had to look at this and I had to think very carefully, well, if I really want to get out of this material world, and I think every devotee wants to get out of this material world. I think every devotee realizes this material world is a terrible place. And the best thing we can do is get out of here. Well, then he has to keep up his side of the promise. If that promise is really spiritual, if that promise is actually a real promise, then there won't be any grounds, there won't be any excuse, there won't be any conditions that would allow us to break it. So I had to take a really good look at this. And after deliberating about it for some time, the only conclusion I could come up with was that I had to, at the next opportunity, completely give up my material nonsense, which there wasn't really much material nonsense. I was working for a living, had my own apartment and stuff like that, but there wasn't much, it's not like I was operating a bar or something like that. But still, I was living for my own benefit. I was living for my pleasure. I wasn't living for my spiritual master's pleasure or Krishna's pleasure. So I decided that, okay, at the next opportunity, I'm going to give up all this and I'm going to go into intensive sadhana and I'm going to try to get somewhere, better than where I'm at. So not so long later, I lost my job. Well, that's not quite correct. My contract was terminated. I always had my own business. I was an independent contractor. I had a sole proprietorship consulting business. I really don't like working for people. So my contract was terminated, and I found myself having to decide, am I going to look for another contract, get some more business, or should I go into my sadhana? And I had already really made up my mind. So I took this as good news. I took it as Krishna's confirmation that this is what I should do. And I packed up all my stuff, threw out a bunch of unused or useless stuff, and went out to Hawaii. And the rest of the story. I sat for 6 months and chanted and then had an experience of Krishna Darshan and like that. Of course, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's the basic thing. And then I began to preach. That was in 2002. Now we're in 2009, almost exactly 7 years later. And now we have a nice worldwide online Sangha and a little monastic community of 5 monks, Krishna devotees. And I'm taking a look at this, and I'm looking at the situation in the world. And I'm going, well, now I feel satisfied. You might say, how can you feel satisfied? The whole world is falling apart. We're going into 2012 and all this crazy stuff is coming down, and the economy is failing, and your devotees are so neophyte they can't even preach properly. So, why do you feel satisfied? I feel satisfied because I upheld my promise. For the last 7 years, I have been preaching Krishna consciousness full time. Not many people have responded. Not many people take it seriously. My godbrothers, if you ask them, they don't have many kind words to say about what we're doing. And, we wish them the best, but we think they made a terrible mistake. And, well, all that.